What is going on, everybody? I hope you are all doing well today. Today is a special day. I am joined by the one and the only amazing Josie Woaah. Josie, how are you doing today?
I'm so good. I'm excited to talk about Metroid. I feel like this
Metroid,
is a topic not a lot of people have been touching on lately, so I'm ready to dive into it.
and not just any Metroid. Metroid Prime 4, the one and only Metroid game that is still a mystery 6 years later, since it was announced at E3 2017. And before we get into the discussion about where this game is and so much speculation surrounding it, where is your hype level at for the game currently right now?
Say probably like a 7. Like I'm very excited, but I have to see what Nintendo's going to do with this, you know? It's like Nintendo has this great way of making some amazing strides with the Switch, but they're due for a fumble, and I hope it's not Prime, but I'm just saying like I'd like to see a little bit more before I can go all the way in, you know?
That's totally understandable. One of the things that I definitely am hopeful that they don't do is this does not become another Metroid Prime Federation Force, because that is
Oh, jeez.
I was there for that reveal because it had been such a long gap between Metroid releases, and then they decided at E3 2015, hey, well, here's a new Metroid Prime, and then it turned out to be the worst thing in the world. So I hope that all these years of them just being so secretive and being so quiet and having their time to develop the game, I hope it turns out to be good. But yeah, so before we talk about like the future and where we think this game is going, let's go back to 2017 just for a little bit. Just kind of like when that trailer was announced and when they announced it at that E3 show. Where were you when that game was announced? Did you have any exposure to the Metroid franchise? How much knowledge of the game do you
So
have?
this was pretty early in my, like getting into video games hardcore, I guess you could say. So in 2017, I had heard a good bit about Metroid. My dad played the original on the NES, and he hated it. So I was like under the impression that Metroid wasn't that good, but it was just from my dad's perspective, who like was annoyed as a kid that he didn't like that game. Um, but I knew it was a huge deal because I knew it's been a dormant franchise, and actually, about like a month or so before that, I sort of got into Dolphin, the emulator,
Right.
and I was looking up, the best GameCube games, and Metroid Prime is always like number 1, number 2. So I had kind of dabbled with that game a little bit, but I just wasn't really sure. Basically, what I knew of Metroid at that time was that it was Nintendo's first-person shooter, and I thought it'd be great to see another one because we haven't seen a first-person shooter from Nintendo since then. But that was mostly my exposure with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you're right. It has been such a long time since Nintendo has done a first-person shooter, and that's why I really hope that when Metroid Prime 4 finally releases and it's revealed, that we see that they're doing it right. And I do have a little bit of hope for this game because, and we'll kind of talk about it a little as we go further, but when they announced the delay back in 2019, they announced first and foremost, we're handing this back to Retro Studios, who
Right.
started this whole thing, who started with Prime 2, and Prime 3. We've had lots of games to hold us over while we waited for this game. We've had Metroid Dread, which was like your first bit. I know it was like your first big,
Yeah.
introduction into the Metroid series. We've had Metroid Prime Remaster, which was rumored and they finally gave it to us back in February.
That rumor cycle was vicious.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
awful.
Every time, it's coming. It's coming, and like, is it though? Is it really coming? Is it?
I just thought it wasn't real after a while. I was like,
Yeah.
this thing is just never gonna actually come out.
I gave up on it. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go into this February Direct, hoping at most for a new Tears of the Kingdom trailer. I had Metroid far from my mind, and when they announced it and Shadow dropped it that very
Right.
day, I was just like, no flipping way. And so
I know. My reaction to that, I was like, "Oh no way, it's coming out!" And then they were like, "And it's coming out today," and I like threw myself back from the chair, and I was like, "What?" Like I was flipping out.
Oh yeah, that direct in particular felt like Nintendo Christmas for
Yeah.
everybody. Like we got Metroid that day, we got Game Boy and Game Boy Advance dropped on NSO
That was wild.
very day, and then not too long after we got Metroid Fusion on NSO, which more Metroid.
That was awesome.
That was amazing.
I think that's my favorite Metroid game, to be honest.
Oh
I
yeah.
thought it was Dread for a long time, but then I played Fusion, and people don't like the linearity in that game, and that is all of my complaints with the Metroid franchise has been how obtuse it is to navigate.
Right.
And so when there was like a little bit of direction, it was the best thing in the world. I absolutely adore that game.
Yeah. So I think then you're really gonna like Metroid Zero Mission then, because when it eventually comes to Game Boy Advance NSO, because that game does nothing but guide you from start to finish, 100%.
Let's go.
So there you go.
That's what I like.
You got it. So yeah, it's a great game, and it's much better than the NES Metroid that you had to torture yourself with. Oh man,
That was like one of the worst experiences streaming. I was so mad. I don't usually get like actively upset, but I was fuming because the little things will fly at you so fast, and they take an entire energy tank. And when you got like 5 of them, it was insane.
Oh yeah. Don't take this the wrong way, but my little sis, whenever she has a bad day, she watches your video where you rant about NES Metroid, and it makes her laugh every time.
That's hysterical.
Oh, it's hilarious. It's great. So yeah, we've had so much to hold us over for while we've waited for this mystery of a game, and so let's kind of start talking about kind of when we think we might see this game. And the first option that many people are coming to speculate right now is there's chances of a Nintendo Direct, possibly in September. We get one just about every year. So do you think that we could possibly see another grand re-reveal for the game in this September Direct? I am kind of leaning more towards kind of a maybe, only in the sense of I think this Direct is probably going to be very Mario centered again, with Mario Brothers Wonder and Super Mario RPG, but they ended with Mario Brothers Wonder in the last Direct, and I don't think they can end with Mario again. I feel like they would need to have something big and spectacular to end this Direct on, so what do you think?
Here's my theory for that Direct. I think that to start out the presentation, they're announcing Prime 2 coming to Switch, and then to close it, they're announcing Prime 3.
Oh, that would...
And I think it'd be awesome, and I think it's also sort of wishful thinking, but I honestly think that's a little bit more realistic than expecting Prime 4, because in my mind, Prime 4 at a certain point has sort of become... Like, I think it might be a cross-generational game. I was a long believer of... Well, I never believed in the Switch Pro. But then, now that we're, like, getting sort of to essentially the 7th year of the Switch, I can see them pushing out 2 more years of the Switch while there is still another console. So I think that maybe 2024 would make a lot of sense for a Prime release. Or for, like, Metroid Prime 4. And then it comes out, and that's cross-gen with the next Switch or whatever it is.
Oh, yeah. That would be that would be cool. Metroid Prime 2 at the beginning of the show and Metroid Prime 3 at the end. That would be insane.
Right?
Yeah. And we can actually go right into that. Do we see Metroid Prime 2 and 3 coming to Switch before Metroid Prime 4? And I believe absolutely, 100%. I think whether they're remastered or not is up for debate. I know the rumors back then when they were talking about Prime 1, 2, and 3 coming to Switch, they said that Prime 1 was going to be this remastered version, and Prime 2 and 3 were just going to be kind of upscaled a little bit but they were still going to be ported, but I still 100% think we're definitely getting Metroid Prime 2 and 3.
Yeah, I think it'd just be smart, because like then you can have, and I think recently they've kind of prioritized putting a whole franchise on the Switch. We have Pikmin 1, 2, 3, and 4 now. And I think it would make sense to have Metroid Prime 1, 2, and 3 instead of just having the first one and then going directly into 4, because that sort of, I feel like there's like a weird gap there that's a lot of Metroid fun and stuff for new fans to experience that they haven't before. People like me who I'm not probably going to go back and play Metroid 2 or 3 unless I get the chance to do so on the Switch. And so I think they know that there's a huge audience there. And I think Prime 1 sold very well, right?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know?
I think, I can't remember exactly the exact sales numbers, but I know it has done far better than what people expected it would.
Yeah.
And I think this is showing Nintendo that, hey, people actually care about Metroid. Don't sleep on it anymore. Don't make it to where we're waiting 10 years between releases, you know what I mean? And so I think also that is also showing, and I think Nintendo knows that with Metroid Prime 4, they can't mess up with this game. They really need to make sure that this game is a home run, because before Metroid Dread was announced and it came out and Metroid's kind of started its, turning back into the spotlight, it was not going to be a very successful franchise anymore. Because the last game we got before Metroid Dread was Metroid Samus Returns. Sold well, but was not, it was 3DS. A lot of people's complaint about that game was, why didn't you port it to Switch? But before Metroid Samus Returns, was the whole deal with Federation Force, and people, it was not a good thing. The Metroid franchise was left pretty sour in people's minds. And even before that, we had Metroid Other M, which came out on the Wii, and that one was also very controversial with all the terrible voice acting and all that. Have you played Metroid Other M? Just out of curiosity? No.
I decided to stay away. I've heard it's pretty bad.
It was not a great game. Some people like it. Some people think it's okay. I am not one of those people. It was just yeah. So but that just goes to show, I think Nintendo knows that with them bringing back something as significant as Metroid Prime, that it needs to be good. It needs to be a home run, especially since they're introducing it to pretty much a new generation of fans, because it's been, I think I did the math earlier, 16 years since Metroid Prime 3.
That's crazy.
That's a long time. Let's see, 16 years. I was a kid, a little kid when Metroid Prime 3 released on Wii. And so it's essentially a whole new generation who's going to be picking up and playing this game. And so that kind of leads me to my next thing. Do you think that the gameplay for this should evolve beyond the traditional Metroid Prime formula, or do you think they should play it safe and keep it kind of how they've done in the past 3 games?
That's a good question. I think to capture the new audiences, they have to do something a little bit different, because first-person shooters have come a long way since Prime originally came out, and the first game is really good, especially with the new controls that they put into it. However, it's still kind of a very not arcadey, but it's very linear, and there's not a lot of freedom. And that's not to say it's not confusing as hell, but it does that, and then it doesn't have this endless exploration, really, that people have come to expect in newer games. And I think that probably the best way to implement this to a new audience is just to take that more traditional approach, sort of take a page out of what Halo's doing. Give us maybe some more open areas. I don't think it necessarily needs to be open world, but if we have pretty open areas where we can travel back and forth, do whatever we want, have some collectibles all through the thing, and I don't know, I think it could benefit a lot from some sort of online component. I think it's a really, it's obviously that's something that Halo does, but really I think that it could go a long way in the longevity and just the, there's all these YouTubers that will play this game forever if it has that multiplayer, and that could 100%. Be a huge audience, and that could bring so many kids into it and get them excited about the game. And even if you're not a fan of Metroid, you can love this first-person shooter from Nintendo, but they can also have, all of those older Metroid elements to appease the older fans. But at the same time, I think just a franchise this old needs to somewhat evolve.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting you talk about online play, because believe it or not, Metroid Prime 2 actually had a multiplayer component. It wasn't online, but you could play, if you had four different controllers, you could play split screen, and you basically had 4 different people playing as Samus, and you had to basically eliminate each other. And you had to.
That's awesome.
So if they took that and translated it to online, I didn't think about that. That would be a ton of fun. I think, you're right. I think a lot of people would get into that, they've definitely, and the fact that Retro Studios has experimented with it before Metroid Prime 2 tells me they could definitely evolve it, and it would be.
And Nintendo seems to be more about online than they ever had. I mean, look at Splatoon. So they could have another game that kind of runs parallel to Splatoon and sort of captures that type of audience while still being this amazing Metroid game. I'm not saying, I don't want the multiplayer to take away from anything that the base game does. I want an amazing story. I want awesome gameplay and really just solid everything, but I think it could be a great supplemental thing that could really make the game go like mega viral and sell really well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about just the online component. Nintendo, if you want your Nintendo Switch Online service to gain any positivity whatsoever, bring this online component to Metroid Prime 4 and say, hey, if you're a Nintendo Online, if you have Nintendo Switch Online, you can take part in this online feature. It would take off in a heartbeat. I think it would instantly. So you were talking about, you mentioned open world, kind of a perfect segue. Do you think this game should be completely like 100% open world, like Tears of the Kingdom, and like go it, full freedom, go wherever you want, or do you think it should be kind of a mixed bag? Because Metroid Dread was sort of like that. You could see it actually rewarded you for sequence breaking the game. I don't know if you've seen some of those clips where it's like some people have gone to get the morph ball early and then they came back and fought Kraid and there was like a secret cutscene that they unlocked. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh, that's cool.
So,
yeah, I didn't see that.
So the developers have thought about that. Like you were if you wanted to try and go get the items in this order, you can do that. So do you think this game should be full-fledged open world? Is that what you would want?
I personally wouldn't do fully open world just because that is like sort of an overblown genre right now, and especially it'll come out like a year or two later, but we're getting Starfield, and that is like a huge space open world. You might want to sort of differentiate the game, and obviously like they can't know that Starfield's being developed at the same time that this is, obviously it's been in development forever, but I think a lot of the appeal of Metroid is sort of that like maze-like linearity where it's not like things are hidden, it's hard to do things, but you don't have this wide open canvas to go and do anything. You have those limitations, and I think those limitations allow the developers to really make some like awesome just level design and stuff like that. So I think it'd be take a little bit away from the game, I guess, if it were to be open world. What do you think?
Yeah, I would have to agree. Open world, as fun as it is, and while Zelda has definitely evolved into a great open world format, I don't think it would fit Metroid. I really don't. Metroid is kind of meant for, you start out very low powered and you slowly grow your abilities and you search for those abilities, and you do that by finding them in a very linear fashion. You go to this area and then you go to this area, and Metroid really benefits from that. And that kind of leads me to my next thing, because the map system in Metroid Prime, very debatable in terms of how good it is. It can throw a lot of people off. I personally have not had a problem with it, mainly because I played through Metroid Prime so much, and I'm used to it. But for newer people who probably got into Metroid Prime with the remaster, they probably saw that map and was like, what in the world was this? So what do you think, like things like the map, do you think that should change? Do you think that should be made a little bit easier in Metroid Prime 4?
I think there's a lot of quality of life things that they can do to Metroid to allow it to just be a little bit more accessible. Things like the map, it can be super complicated. They did something really cool, I think, in Tears of the Kingdom with the dungeons, and when they have different levels, you can just select what level you're on, and then it'll show you the map for that. And I think it could be cool if they did something like that for Metroid, and it would just make it a little less obtuse. And like obviously they'd probably have to adapt it to a little bit different than Tears of the Kingdom, but I think if they sort of scaled back on like the crazy weird 3D perspective, and you have to really look at that thing, like it's hard, at least for someone who's not like super versed in Metroid. And so I think like doing stuff like that, and maybe implementing some sort of objective system where if you want, you could toggle it on or off. So if you like want them to kind of tell you where to go next, you have that ability. I mean it's what they did in Tears of the Kingdom too. Like you can turn waypoints on or off. If they would just do that in Metroid, I think that would go a long way to help just people who are new to the franchise get into it, because there's a lot of like really random difficult fetch quests, at least in Prime 1.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Those artifacts. Oh my goodness.
Oh my god.
I remember playing through Metroid Prime for the first time, and I know I was able to guide you through it very easily, Josie, but the first time I played through that, I had no clue what the heck I was doing. I was like, how are you supposed to find these things? Where do you go? And then I didn't realize that you had to go all the way back to the artifact temple, scan each of those things, because that's how you figure it out. You scan each of those, like, statues in the artifact, and they give you, like, vague, it's not like they tell you, hey, it's here. It's vague little hints, like, hey, it's like a riddle, like, you know, you read the riddle, you guess where do these are.
That is the worst.
So it's, you know, and it was just crazy. And finally, yeah, I defaulted to a guide. I know, it's crazy. And so I looked for a guide and found them. But I was just like, but what's even worse, Metroid Prime 2's take on this whole quest has a very similar fetch quest at the very end of it, where you're looking for these 9 keys to access the final temple. Yes, there are temples in Metroid Prime 2, but these things are invisible. They're nowhere to be seen. You have to you have to get like this special visor that allows you to see them, and it's insane. Don't do another fetch quest in Metroid Prime 4. Just do away with it.
Yeah.
I think it's unnecessary. I think it's very unnecessary.
Or, like, if they did it, give us those waypoints just to tell us where to go.
100%.
Like, if they want us to go all the way back and use these abilities that we now have, that's fine. I just think that if they were to tell us literally where to go, have, like, a little thing so we can just follow the marker, it'd be so much better than, like, just this super obtuse game design. And honestly, it was super long ago, and games have come very, very far in the last 16 years. So I'm sure they're gonna do something to help people out a little bit.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure Retro Studios has got to know, hey, it's been 16 years since Metroid Prime. I think we're gonna have to take it to the next. We're gonna have to modernize it for this new generation, for this new audience, which kind of goes to my next thing. You know, kind of our biggest hopes for what this game will do. I hope this game displays the maximum power that the Switch can do, because I know there's a whole lot of talk about next gen Switch Pro. When I saw that trailer for Metroid Prime Remaster for the first time, the first thing that popped into my head was, we haven't even seen the full capacity that the Switch can do.
Right.
This thing is showing, like, graphics that I didn't even think the Switch could handle. When I saw that, the first thing that popped into my mind was, if this is how good a remastered looks, Prime 4 has got to be looking insane. So
yeah. I think something similar. Like, I'd want it to really just show off what the Switch can do, especially if it's gonna be like somewhat of the last hurrah for the Switch. I think it'd be awesome for it to just really go out with a bang and show every possible inch of power the Nintendo Switch has. On top of it, I mean, I think it is wishful thinking, sort of, and my biggest hope would be that it has some sort of multiplayer component, because I think that would help it do well. Plus, I, like, selfishly would probably have the best time with that. So, like, I just think they could do so much. And they had that DS game, Hunters, right?
And fun fact, they're gonna have to find some way to explain some of that game into Prime 4, because the villain from Metroid Prime Hunters is gonna be the villain for Metroid Prime 4. If you beat Metroid Prime 3 100%, he's the one chasing after. There's a ship that's chasing after Samus, and it's his ship. It's the villain from Prime Hunters. So they're gonna have to figure out how to, if they even pick up where Prime 3 and they incorporate those story elements, you know. So another thing that I'm really hoping that this game does is that it evolves, like, kind of like we were talking earlier. I hope the gameplay is evolved a bit, but not too much to where it derails from the Metroid formula. Like, Metroid Dread was a great example. Like, it was evolved enough to bring in new players, but it still maintained that same Metroid feel.
Yeah.
And I feel like Metroid Prime 4 is going to be that for the Prime universe, for the Prime games. And
I think Retro, like, is going to really make sure that they have at least the gameplay of Samus nailed down, because that's, like, probably the most important thing. It's like the feel, and especially in a first-person shooter, you know, you don't want to feel like nauseous. You want to make sure that any quality of life features or anything that people were complaining about with the original trilogy is sort of fixed here, and this is just, like, the ultimate version. It's like how Dread is, like, the ultimate version of 2D Metroid, and I think that's what you want from 4.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so, kind of going back to 2017, do we think this game was announced way too early? Because it sounds to me like, I go back to that one trailer, that is the first time I think I have ever seen Nintendo do a logo and nothing else. I don't think I've ever seen them do that with any other game. And the fact that they did that, and then when we find out in 2019 that they are passing it back to Retro, which makes me wonder, why didn't you give it to Retro in the first place? You know, it would have saved you a lot of trouble. But it sounds to me like they really didn't know what they were doing with the game to begin with if they were just showing us a logo and nothing else. So do you think this game was revealed a bit too early now that we look back?
Yeah, of course. I think it was definitely... I mean, I guess there can be an argument, though, because, like, it was Bandai Namco, right, developing it originally. Maybe Bandai thought they were, like, on the tail end of it, and Nintendo just hated it and scrapped the whole thing. So, like, I think with this kind of stuff, you can never really know. Obviously, now it has been announced way too early. I mean, knowing what we know now with it giving it back to Retro and stuff, and maybe they should have, I don't know, tested it more before they actually announced it in a direct and stuff like that, so that they didn't have to come and make that second announcement. It was obvious. I think it was very much released way too, or shown much too early. Especially, like, you don't have any gameplay. It's been 6 years. We still don't have any gameplay. Like, you know,
we did get that Twitter post on Retro's page.
Yeah, the background change. Yeah.
I remember there were YouTubers just from that, people making long hour discussions of, look at this banner page.
Yes.
But that just goes to show people are ready to see this game. People are ready to actually see what has Retro been working on. Why has it taken 6 years? It's been 4.5 years, over 4.5 years since the restart, and that's why I think.
Right, that was 2018, right?
2019.
2019. Oh, okay. So, okay.
We've got to be due for a re-reveal of this game fairly soon, and whether it's at a Nintendo Direct or maybe even they do a Tears of the Kingdom route and they give it its own, like, 10-minute gameplay demonstration and they show us.
Right.
It might be more than 10 minutes, just given the fact that this is the reintroduction of Metroid Prime after 16 years of absence, and no, Federation Force doesn't count. No. There's a lot to speculate about, lots to just, you know, there's so many reasons to be hyped for this game. My game hype for this level, I really didn't answer this earlier, but my game hype for this level has been probably, even though we've seen nothing, anytime I get into a conversation about it, my hype instantly goes back
just
up.
Skyrockets.
Goes back up, just because. And even anytime I boot up Metroid Prime Remastered again just to play through it and just to see those graphics again, it just makes me think Metroid Prime 4 is probably looking amazing. It sounds like Retro is making sure that when this is re-revealed, that it's going to blow people's minds. And so yeah, absolutely. So Josie, do you have any final thoughts, final hopes for Metroid Prime 4?
I hope it's good. I really hope it's good. And I know that Retro is going to do a good job. I think it's impressive that Nintendo had the courage to pull the plug on Bandai Namco. You know, like, that's why I think there was barely any pushback to that original announcement. And a lot of us have been very patient with this game. You know, obviously we all want it to come out, but nobody's, like, pissed off at Nintendo for taking their time with it. And we've seen from games like Tears of the Kingdom, if we let Nintendo take their time, they're going to blow us away. So I'm excited to see it. I think it's probably going to get announced in sometime in 2024, but we'll have to wait and see.
And, you know, it's just interesting you say that. You know, when they came out and announced that it was getting scrapped and they were starting development from the beginning, like, you could see it on that producer's face. I believe it was Shinya Takahashi who came out and announced that. You could see the look on his face. He was like, we don't want to do this, but it's that bad, you guys. We've got to, you know. But I think, I absolutely agree with you, Josie. I think when we see this game again, I think it's going to absolutely blow our minds. And I think another reason why I think people have not been so salty about waiting is because they've done such a good job of having things for us to play while we wait. You know, we've had Metroid Dread, we've had Metroid Prime Remaster, we've had Metroid Fusion on NSO. We're probably going to get Metroid Zero Mission pretty soon on Game Boy Advance NSO.
Yeah.
So, you know, and hopefully, fingers crossed, Metroid Prime 2 and 3. And so I think, you know, there's a lot of Metroid now to play on Switch while we wait for the new game. And when it was announced in 2017, there was almost no Metroid on the Switch to play.
Yeah.
And so it's so, but yeah,
Do we have every 2D Metroid on Switch?
Yes, we do actually. Metroid NES, Metroid Return of Samus, Super Metroid, Metroid Fusion, and Metroid Dread. I would prefer they port Metroid Samus Returns just to make the gameplay of Metroid feel a little bit better. But you know, regardless, we can now say yes, every 2D Metroid is on the Switch.
So they have to give us Prime 2 and 3. Then we'll have every Metroid, like mainline Metroid. That'd be awesome.
Exactly. And so I think in due time, that's probably what they're going to do. And another reason, I know this is kind of, you know, tailoring away from the main conversation, but I'll just kind of talk about this for a little bit. I've had this theory for the longest time that I think Nintendo Switch, and even the reason why they're holding back on announcing the next gen, is because I think they're slowly making the Nintendo Switch like their ultimate Nintendo machine in a way. Because we're NES, SNES, Game Boy Advance, N64. They've started porting like the best of their Wii library with like Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, Skyward Sword HD, and you know they're porting the best of their Wii library. A lot of the best of the Wii U library is already on Switch, except Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD. Come on, Nintendo. Please.
And Nintendo Land. Oh
my gosh, that was a great game.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're porting the best of all of their libraries, and I think one of the reasons why they're holding back on next gen is because once they finally do have all those components, all the best of all of their libraries on Switch, they'll be able to say, hey, yes, look at all these amazing new graphics on our new system, but hey, guess what? The best of every Nintendo console is now on one system, and you can play it on this next gen system. And I think if they are doing that, and if they do that, I think it's going to make the Switch Pro or whatever it ends up being just pop off when it gets announced. So
I am like praying that it is backwards compatible.
Oh yeah, and I think it will be.
If
it's a cross-gen release, I think 100% it will be.
Yeah.
So, my final hopes kind of similar to what you were saying. I think we're both on the same page. I hope that this displays the full maximum capacity for the Switch, and that it blows our minds whenever it comes out. And I just hope I hope it sells well too. I hope it sells really well.
Yeah.
That it shows Nintendo that people care about Metroid, because I've always felt like Metroid is a franchise that Nintendo just sleeps on. Either they sleep on it, or they make some really weird choices with it.
Yeah.
So, I hope that...
So I'm saying, give us multiplayer, and then it'll bang.
That's right. That, and, just, making sure that it tailors to just the fans who grew up with Metroid, and in this new generation, kind of what Zelda has done with Tears of the Kingdom. It's brought some of those classic elements, and with the new elements of this new formula that they've done. So yeah, but Josie, thank you for talking with me and just discussing Metroid. It's been amazing talking with you. You want to plug yourself? Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me at YouTube at Josie WOAH. I make Nintendo focused content. Usually like retro reviews on older Nintendo games, and then like reviews on the newer games, and some fun videos in between. I also have a Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. It's a good time. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. This has been fun.
Absolutely. So yeah, all of Josie's socials will be linked in the description below. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Until the next time, everyone, thanks for watching, and take care.